An Indian sanitation worker found a body that was completely black all over while cleaning. He initially thought it was a foreigner murdered in India, but found that the victim had been poisoned by a toxin that turns the entire body black. As the investigation deepened, it unexpectedly uncovered an unsolved case from over a decade ago, after the body was found. Suspecting the victim was a foreign woman, which might involve international issues, the Indian police immediately dispatched officers to the scene to investigate. Through a simple on-site inspection, the officers confirmed the deceased was a woman in her early 20s with no obvious wounds. Besides, they found no signs of a struggle at the scene, so the police inferred this wasn't the primary crime scene. Subsequently, the police sealed the woman's personal belongings as evidence, while the body was sent to the mortuary pending further autopsy to confirm the specific cause of death. It wasn't long before the police received the autopsy report on the woman, and its contents shocked them. The deceased wasn't a black woman but an Indian national named Lisa. The autopsy report showed the girl had been injected with a toxin, causing all the blood in her body to accumulate in the superficial layer of the skin, hence her entire body turning black. However, this type of toxin is a banned substance in school laboratories, and ordinary people can hardly obtain it. Thus, the police suspect the culprit might be someone like a university professor. This news caused a huge sensation, and newspapers everywhere were discussing the real identity of the culprit. At this moment, the scene shifts to a middle-aged drunk man named Lassie, who was once a senior detective in the police station. But due to a case many years ago, Lassie fell into a total slump, drinking all day and becoming an alcoholic. He casually looked at the news on his phone, but the next second Lassie suddenly sat up. Because the deceased's death condition was the same as that of the case from many years ago, Lassie couldn't help but recall that unsolved case back then. As the lead investigator, he remembered that the deceased was also killed by this toxin, with the entire body turning black. Later, Lassie was also attacked by the culprit during the investigation, but the culprit, in a hurry, didn't inject the full dose of the poison into him, so only part of Lassie's body turned black, and his life wasn't in danger. However, this didn't pull Lassie out of his slump. The reason he became like this is that the deceased in that old case was his daughter. As a father, he couldn't avenge his child, which caused him to fall into a slump ever since. Now that the culprit has reappeared, Lassie swore to bring him to justice. He rushed to the police station and applied to his superior to take charge of this case. The superior understood Lassie's feelings over the years and readily agreed. After getting his superior's approval, Lassie headed to Kerala, the location of the crime. With authorization from his superiors, Lassie took over the entire task force. He plunged into the investigation without any delay. With years of investigative experience, Lassie quickly noticed some details that the previous officers had missed. First was the body dumping site. Lassie observed that there were surveillance cameras, both in front of and behind this garbage dump. With only this spot being a surveillance blind spot, the culprit being able to accurately find this place and kill Lisa indicated that they were very familiar with the surrounding area, and might even be a local resident. Besides, Lassie also noticed that a heart-shaped gold necklace was missing from Lisa's personal belongings. According to the investigation, this heart-shaped necklace was commissioned by Lisa's boyfriend Suman from a friend abroad, given to Lisa as a birthday gift. That very night, Lisa was murdered, and the gold necklace vanished. An ordinary detective might have thought the culprit acted out of robbery, but Lassie noticed that Lisa still had other gold items, and even a considerable amount of cash on her, all left untouched by the culprit. This clearly contradicted the idea of robbery. Moreover, Lassie noted that according to Suman, he had given the necklace to his girlfriend at Lisa's birthday party that night. Afterward, the two left the bar, with Suman escorting Lisa the entire time, until they parted when they were nearly home. At that time, Lisa said she didn't want her parents to meet Suman so soon. It was truly inconceivable that the culprit could track Lisa's movements and commit the murder in such a short time. Faced with these complicated clues, Lassie simply rewatched the surveillance footage of the area around the time of Lisa's murder. From the footage, Suman wasn't lying. He dropped Lisa off at a junction close to her home, and then Lisa walked through an alley, appearing in a neighbor's surveillance. At this point, she was no more than 50 meters away from her residence. That the culprit could choose such a suitable crime scene made Lassie can't help but suspect a neighbor was the culprit. However, he didn't jump to conclusions and continued to watch the surveillance patiently. 20 minutes after the time of the crime inferred by the forensic doctor, a man in black appeared in the surveillance footage. For some reason, he froze in place and then fled the scene in panic, as if he had encountered something terrifying. Lassie was certain that this man must have seen something, and likely held important clues. Therefore, he immediately searched for traces of this man in black in other surveillance footage. After repeatedly checking, the police found that this man in black kept circling around the nearby roads, seemingly jogging at night, so it's highly likely that he is a local resident. Lassie immediately set off to search for the man in black along the route of his night jog. During the investigation, Lassie noticed a black car by the roadside. He found that there was actually a heart-shaped pattern drawn on the car window, which looked the same as that heart-shaped necklace. Lassie believed this wasn't a coincidence, so he found the car owner to ask about the origin of the pattern. The car owner was an old man in his 80s. He said he didn't know either. Due to old age, he hardly drove anymore and just parked it by the roadside. He speculated it was doodled by someone passing by. Although they failed to get the desired answer from the old man, Lassie and his team still found the person who drew the pattern. They found a fingerprint in the dust on the car window, suspecting it was left by the person who drew the pattern. Later, by comparing data in the database, It was found that the owner of this fingerprint was a 23-year-old young man named Im. Lassie then pulled up the person's information and found that this guy was the mysterious man in black in the surveillance. Moreover, according to the information, Im had been arrested by the police for illegally using prohibited drugs. Upon seeing this information, Lassie began to suspect that Im was the murderer who killed Lisa, so he sent someone to bring him to the police station. However, Lassie didn't rush to interrogate him. Instead, he isolated him in the interrogation room and observed his reactions. From this, Lassie discovered some interesting things. During the first 2 hours, Im seemed perfectly normal, no different from ordinary people, but after 2 hours, he gradually became agitated, kept pacing around the room, and then drank water in front of the water dispenser. This is different from the usual withdrawal symptoms. While Lassie was confused, Im uncharacteristically started drawing on the wall with dust. Lassie noticed that Im was drawing exactly Lisa's face. The information didn't show that Im had ever studied art. While Lassie was full of doubts, Im seemed to be stimulated by something again, hurriedly destroyed the painting, and then ran back to the water dispenser to drink water. He finished a whole bucket of water in just a moment. Then his eyes were bloodshot and he became very violent. When Lassie and others went in to stop him, they saw him rush into the bathroom to drink the dirty water there. Lassie and others hurriedly pulled him up. After Im's emotions calmed down a bit, Lassie began to question him. First, he took out the surveillance footage and asked him if he was that man in black. Im admitted without hesitation. Then Lassie asked him why he suddenly ran away in panic. After hesitating for a moment, Im claimed that he was very afraid of owls. Im stated that he had encountered an owl at that time, which was why he fled in a panic. Although Lassie saw there was indeed a bird in the footage, he didn't believe Im's testimony. Lassie suspected that Im had taken prohibited drugs again, hallucinated, and thus fled in panic. When Lassie mentioned prohibited drugs, a hint of panic appeared on Im's face. This scene was all witnessed by the police. Lassie's assistant interrogated him, asking if he had robbed Lisa to get high, and then killed her for fear of the matter being exposed. Faced with the police's questioning, Im's expression grew more flustered. After hesitating for a long time, he revealed some things the police hadn't known before. Im claimed that he had actually known Lisa many years ago, and they had even been a couple, but later, due to various reasons, they had to break up. As for his illegal use of prohibited drugs, he had no choice. According to Im's account, when he was very young, he accidentally fell into water. Just as he was about to drown, a turtle suddenly appeared underwater, and with its help, Im managed to survive. But since then, he has developed a disease that gives him a photographic memory of everything. With the side effect of frequent headaches, there is currently no cure for it. Doctors only prescribed him some psychiatric sedatives. However, this kind of medicine is a strictly controlled drug in India, with each bottle costing tens of thousands of rupees. Coming from a poor family, Im couldn't afford such high costs, so he had to resort to buying cheap counterfeit drugs on the black market. He was caught by the police, leaving a record of illegal use of prohibited drugs. If that's the case, Im isn't the villain the police imagined, and at least not the murderer who killed Lisa. While they were talking, Im suddenly had another headache attack, and this time he passed out from the pain. Lassie and others sent him to the hospital. After a professional examination, it was learned that a part of Im's brain had lesions, and the prescription given by the doctor was indeed the same as what Im had said before, a strictly controlled psychiatric sedative. Obviously, Im hadn't lied before. After he woke up from the coma, Lassie continued to question him why he had drawn that heart-shaped pattern on the car window. Im claimed that at that time, he suddenly had a headache attack and, in a trance, saw that pattern in the reflection on the water. Later, to alleviate the pain, he drew that pattern on the car window. After hearing Im's account, Lassie pulled up the surveillance footage again to observe the reflection on the water, and indeed found new clues. Lassie speculated that the person who took the necklace was the murderer who killed Lisa. Unexpectedly, he had been staying at the scene and hadn't left. Subsequently, Lassie called up more surveillance footage to look for traces of this murderer. As expected, nothing was found. The culprit was very familiar with the surrounding environment and left almost no flaws. When Lassie was troubled by this, he accidentally heard two cleaners on the street corner discussing the case. After a while, the two brought up Im's matter. They mentioned a very strange point, that owls actually appeared in the city. According to them, owls are nocturnal animals and hardly appear in urban areas. On the day of the crime, not only did an owl appear, but it also happened to be at the scene. Lassie was instantly enlightened by these words, and realized this was definitely not a coincidence. That owl might be raised by the culprit. For this reason, he launched an investigation into the owl. Not long after, Lassie indeed found clues about the owl. According to a blind girl, about a year ago, the hooting of an owl was often heard late at night at a certain corner on 6th Street, because the owl's call was unique. The girl remembered it clearly, but this sound didn't last long and disappeared after a few weeks. Based on the information provided by the girl, Lassie found the apartment where the sound came from, learned from the landlord that this house used to be a shared rental house with a very high turnover of people. As for whether any tenant had raised an owl, the landlord didn't know. However, the landlord had a very deep impression of one tenant. According to her, that tenant had dark, skin, always wore a mask, and even painted the room black. However, this tenant had moved out after ending the lease half a year ago. Up to now, that room has been left unused. After hearing the landlord's description, Lassie entered the room to check, and indeed found it pitch black inside, filled with a pungent stench. Subsequently, he found a crumpled piece of paper in the corner of the cabinet, and when unfolded, found it was a burnt magazine cover. Lassie conducted a careful search in the room, and found a glass bottle on top of the cabinet. He recognized that the potion in this bottle was the toxin that could turn people black. Obviously, the culprit was hiding among the tenants, and it was very likely the mysterious person wearing a mask. This also explains why the culprit was so familiar with the environment of the crime scene. However, even so, it was still not easy to find out that person's identity. After all, even the landlord had never seen what he looked like. Moreover, since the house was a shared rental, there was no record of his name or identity information. For a while, the case got stuck. Just as the police were fully investigating, they received a shocking piece of news. A similar case had happened again in another city. This time, it was also in an alley, and the victim was also a woman. After receiving the report, Lassie rushed to the scene immediately. Through investigation, it was learned that the deceased woman was named Maya, and she was a plastic surgeon specializing in skin whitening. Then Lassie found an interesting point. The magazine fragment he had found in the shared rental house was published by Maya's company. Lassie believed this was definitely not a coincidence, so he conducted relevant investigations into Maya's company. He even found another shocking result. The victim Lisa had once cooperated with Maya's company. Moreover, the magazine cover fragment found earlier in the shared rental house was also published by Lisa's publishing house. Upon seeing this information, Lassie seemed to grasp something, so, not long after, he decided to investigate Mia, the model on the burnt magazine cover. The reason for suspecting her was that Lassie found out she had had a whitening surgery at Maya's company not long ago. Having contact with both victims in a short period of time obviously made her a major suspect. Lassie arranged for his assistant to follow an investigator. Later, when Mia went to the publishing house, the assistant secretly installed a bug on her scarf. Through the bug, Lassie learned that Mia had come to the publishing house to ask for an explanation. Originally, Mia was supposed to be the cover star of this issue of the magazine. To fit the theme, she didn't hesitate to spend money on skin whitening. However, not long ago, the producer unilaterally replaced Mia with his own daughter on the grounds that Mia's skin was too dark to fit the monthly theme. But this questioning not only received no response, but even the boss of the publishing house mocked Mia. Listening to Mia's angry roars, Lassie foresaw that Mia was very likely to do something irrational. Coincidentally, the publishing house had an event tonight, and the producer's daughter would attend, so Lassie arrived at the scene in advance to prevent accidents. Here, he met Lisa's boyfriend Suman again, and only then learned that Suman also worked at the publishing house, and that it was Suman who discovered Mia could become a model for the publishing house in the first place. According to him, when he first met Mia, she was just a junior staff member at a pharmacy. Upon seeing her, Suman noticed that although Mia was dark-skinned, she had a unique temperament that perfectly fit the needs of the badminton-themed shoot. So Suman invited her to audition at the magazine. Unexpectedly, the boss took a fancy to Mia at first sight and signed her on the spot. Since then, she has become a professional model for the publishing house. This was originally unremarkable, but an incident that happened later made Suman regret introducing Mia to the publishing house. According to him, at first, Mia got along very well with everyone and showed extra concern for Suman. At first, he thought it was just gratitude for his help. Unexpectedly, on Valentine's Day last year, Mia suddenly confessed her love to Suman. At that time, she took out a heart-shaped necklace as a token of their love. However, Suman had no affection for Mia, so he rejected her. Even so, Mia still insisted on giving the necklace to Suman, saying it was to thank him for the job opportunity. Since Suman had already rejected Mia once, he felt it inappropriate to refuse again, and thus accepted the heart-shaped necklace. However, after this incident, their relationship cooled off a lot, and their communication was limited to work matters afterwards. Later, Suman got into a relationship with Lisa. To win Lisa's favor, Suman gave that heart-shaped necklace to Lisa as a birthday gift. Hearing this, Lassie couldn't help but feel a sinking feeling. He had guessed the identity of the culprit behind this series of incidents, but he still didn't understand why Mia had hurt his own daughter back then. In Lassie's memory, the two seemed to have no contact. At this moment, Lassie accidentally saw a photo of Mia before her whitening surgery in a promotional magazine. The more Lassie looked at it, the more familiar it seemed. As if thinking of something, he opened his tablet, performed mirror image processing on Mia's face, and then changed the hairstyle. The moment he saw that appearance, Lassie suddenly froze, because he had seen this face before. Time went back to many years ago, when Lassie's daughter had just been admitted to college. Because Lassie's daughter was outstanding in appearance, she quickly attracted the admiration of many boys in college. Among them, a boy named Jeff kept pestering Lassie's daughter. However, Lassie's daughter didn't take a fancy to him, so she was harassed by Jeff to the point of being unbearable. In the end, she had to make a video call to ask her father for help. Lassie assumed the authoritative posture of a police officer, and warned Jeff that if he continued to pester his daughter, he would put him in prison. After that, Jeff really stopped pestering Lassie's daughter, and during that video call, Lassie had seen a dark-skinned girl who raised an owl. That was Mia before her whitening. In the video at that time, Mia seemed to get along well with Jeff. Combining all the previous clues, Lassie couldn't help but suspect that Mia had liked Jeff back then. When she saw the person she loved was fond of Lassie's daughter, she was overcome by evil thoughts, stole toxin from the laboratory, and killed Lassie's daughter. Later, when she learned that Suman had given the necklace she gave him to Lisa, Mia was consumed by jealousy again and killed Lisa in the same way. Moreover, because she had lived in that area before, she was very familiar with the surroundings, and easily found surveillance blind spots to attack Lisa. As for the death of Dr. Maya, there was also a plausible explanation. The beauty salon failed to make Mia as fair as shown in the promotional magazines, so Mia decided to take revenge in a fit of anger. If that was the case, then the producer's daughter was now in great danger. As if to confirm Lassie's guess, at this moment, Lassie's assistant informed him that Mia had just taken the producer's daughter to the beach. Upon hearing this news, Lassie realized something was wrong, and rushed to the beach at top speed. He just happened to catch Mia about to attack the producer's daughter. Lassie shot and killed Mia without hesitation, rescuing the producer's daughter. With this, all mysteries were solved, and the film ended.